Cool. So we've successfully converted our procedural programming into object-oriented programming. If we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see we still use some code. This is procedural still, but we're going to have some of that no matter what because we have to call classes from somewhere. In Drupal 8, we can still write a lot of procedural code, and in fact, a lot of the hooks that we end up working with are going to be procedural. But there will be plenty of places where we can also use objects and classes to wrap around our code. Okay, so let's step back for a moment. You've been introduced to a lot of the basic concepts and a couple of the ideas about why we want to use object-oriented programming at all. We've seen that it establishes explicit relationships between different pieces of data. We can use whatever names we want for methods to describe them more accurately instead of creating super long function names. And we can specify properties that we can use across multiple functions or methods, which is really quite challenging and error-prone if you're doing it with just functions. So these are really some technical advantages that should start making you feel like you're excited to some degree about the idea of using object-oriented programming if you haven't before. So if we're thinking about object-oriented programming in a theoretical sort of sense, the idea is that we have objects and we're trying to make our objects flexible enough so that they can be used with each other in unanticipated ways. Now, in a way, we can do that with functions, right? Because we can build a function and we can say this function is for this. But objects are much more powerful because they can contain methods within themselves and properties within themselves. Functions just say you can put in something and get something else out. Objects can allow you to assign a set of behaviors to something that never had those behaviors before. So one of the ideas that you're going to run across as you start to dig into object-oriented programming is that ideally, you should be able to break your code up so that each class is only responsible for one thing. But what does that mean exactly? For example, our form class deals with forms, and that's one thing, right? But also, a form actually is a conglomerate of a number of other things. We have a tool that validates the form. We have specific inputs. Each one of those inputs could be its own thing. We could actually break this form class into numerous classes that deals with all of those individual pieces. We can have an individual class that deals with text areas, and another one that deals with email inputs, and another one that deals with validation. And this is the part where your brain might start hurting a little bit, because you want to do things the right way, but also you don't want to add this extra overhead of structure that you don't necessarily need for the projects that you're working on. So before your head explodes, I just wanted to talk about a couple of ideas that will help you as you start to think about how you factor your code.